So let me ask you something. When it comes to our own personal growth, who is really responsible? Is it our mentors or teachers? Is it just our own hard work? Well, a really powerful passage in the Bible gives us an answer that might surprise you, and today we're going to dive right into it.
Here it is. This is our central idea, coming straight from 1 Corinthians chapter 3. The Apostle Paul uses this simple farming metaphor to get at a really profound spiritual truth. He says, look, he planted a seed, and another leader named Apollos came along and watered it, but the true power, the source of all the growth, that came from God. So let's unpack what this really means and why it was so important for him to say.
So, why did Paul even need to explain this? Well, he was writing to the church in Corinth. Now, you have to picture Corinth. It was this bustling port city, famous for its competitive spirit, its celebrity philosophers. People were obsessed with wisdom and status. And that whole worldly mindset had started to creep into the church, and it was causing a serious problem. They were totally fractured by internal divisions. Paul does not pull any punches here. He tells them straight up that he couldn't talk to them like they were mature believers. Instead, he had to give them spiritual milk, the absolute basics of the faith, because they just weren't ready for the solid food of deeper teaching. They were, in a word, stuck.
And what was the core issue? It was all about jealousy and arguments. The church was breaking up into these little factions, these fan clubs around their favorite leaders. It was basically Team Paul versus Team Apollos, like a spiritual popularity contest. And this kind of behavior was just clear-cut evidence that they were missing the whole point of their faith. So here's the crucial point. Paul defined their spiritual immaturity by their actions. Because they were so focused on human leaders, they ended up in this trap of jealousy and division. They were acting just like the culture all around them, instead of being transformed by the very faith they said they believed in.
To fix their thinking, Paul brings back that farming metaphor we saw a minute ago. It's such a simple but really powerful way to clarify the proper roles of leaders and just show what the true process of spiritual growth actually looks like.
So the process breaks down kind of like this. Paul says, hey, I did my part. I planted the seed of the gospel. Then Apollos came along and did his part. He watered that seed with more teaching. Okay, both roles were different and both were absolutely necessary. But what about that last step, that question mark? What is it that actually causes the growth?
And this matters for every single one of us, because let's be real, the path of faith isn't always a straight line. Things like pride and division, they're like thorns that can just choke out our potential. The goal is to move from that state of infancy onto a path that leads to real, fruitful growth. It's a journey that takes humility and, honestly, just a willingness to be taught. And this brings us right to the heart of Paul's message. The planting and the watering, yeah, they're important, but they have zero power in and of themselves. So Paul pivots to reveal the one true source of all spiritual growth. This is the exact question the Corinthians were getting wrong. By focusing all their energy on Paul and Apollos, they were giving credit to the farmers instead of the one who created life itself. And the answer is just that simple and that profound. Only God. Paul makes it crystal clear that human effort, no matter how skilled or how sincere it is, cannot produce a single drop of spiritual life on its own. In fact, Paul says the planter and the waterer are nothing in comparison. Now, it's not that their work is worthless, it's vital. But when you compare it to the miracle-working power of God, who creates growth out of nothing, well, there's just no comparison. All the power belongs to Him. So, the crucial takeaway here is this. Our favorite pastors, authors, and mentors, they're simply tools in the hands of the ultimate builder. When we remember that true growth is a gift from God, it protects us from putting people on a pedestal, and it makes sure that God and God alone gets all the glory for the good changes in our lives. Okay, so understanding this is one thing, but how do we actually apply it? Let's get really practical and look at how we can live this out and shift our focus from immaturity to maturity. First, let's talk about your personal path to maturity. It really starts with the humility to ask God, hey, where are my blind spots? It continues with the discipline of spending regular time in Scripture and prayer. And it completely transforms our relationships when we actively choose to replace comparison with gratitude. That means we celebrate when someone else succeeds, we thank God for their gifts instead of measuring them against our own. And second, in how we see others and how we see God. Let's make it a point to thank God for the planters and the waterers He's put in our lives. Let's resist that temptation to rank them, and remember, they're all on the same team. And most importantly, let's make it a habit to give God the direct credit for any and all growth we see in ourselves.
So if you remember just one thing from all this, let it be this. In every step forward, in every bit of progress, in every single victory, give God the glory, because He is the one who makes things grow.
So let's end with just a moment of reflection. As you look at your own life, what areas is God calling you to trust Him for growth in? Where do you need to stop trying in your own strength and just start relying on His power?
Thank you so much for joining us as we've walked through this passage from 1 Corinthians. Just remember, the journey of faith isn't really about our effort, but it's about a seed that's been planted in us, growing by a power that is far, far greater than our own.